The scene starts off with our main character seemingly waking up from a nightmare he had just had about doing everything for his revenge. And as he gets up, he wipes off the tears that come off his eye, and with a serious face, he looks like he's determined to take on the day's challenges. And then we see his nurse outside of his apartment, and she plans on sneaking up on our main character, trying to surprise him by her entrance and simultaneously sending a fake message saying that she'll arrive 30 minutes later, when in fact, she's right in front of his door. When suddenly our main character shows up right in front of her, which spikes her shock, at which our main character tells her to act her age, but she simply pouts and enters his room. She then starts examining our main character's health, measuring his blood pressure, which is over 110. Then she asks our main character how his limbs feel, but he coldly responds by saying it doesn't hurt much. She then follows up by stating that, though he may give her cold replies, he should recognize that they're together in their situationship and that he should be fully honest with her, and she asks him once more how his condition is. But he answers once more that it doesn't hurt much. And when she finally gets tired enough of our main character's games, she reveals that our main character is pretty much healed now. And so that it means that she won't even have to take care of him anymore. And even suggesting that he might have to go back to school, even jokingly saying that he might even be able to bully a couple of people since he has to now continue middle school as a 17-year-old. But abruptly our main character towers over the nurse and screams at her that he will not be going back to school ever again, showing disapproval for her suggestion. This of course leaves the nurse in a state of shock, but it may seem that the nurse is in fact shocked at something else when she observes Se-young's figure. She wonders how he got so tall, even comparing him to how short he once was, wondering to herself how she never noticed and taking a step back. She also notices that he even has gained some muscles as well. When she goes to fist bump his chest, she is immediately mesmerized by how swole he is, and this makes our boy unsettled. And after some time after the nurse has left, the main character goes back to his training, recapping the words. The sword told him that with his heart set on strength, he must grab the overwhelming power and run till exhaustion takes him with the endless training of his body and mind, which will force him to surpass his limits. And at that moment, he will obtain the first power, the pledge of indomitability of the sword. And after the pledge from swinging his sword for 10,000 times without rest in one day, he will obtain the blessing of the sword. And when the pledge and the blessing of the sword become one, the almost unlimited power of essence of faith is born within. And our main character recaps that this is what he remembers from a bit of his memory as he remembers the guy who once wielded the sword before him, and he compares himself to him, acknowledging that he has barely even started to run compared to him, and realize that he must train more and more in order to become stronger. We then get a time skip of 1 year later, and we shift scene to what seems to be a man on television preaching to the world and people about typical political matter. And we are introduced to the 21st president-elect of the country, Jang Sung-chul, who had just finished broadcasting his feed to the hearts of his countrymen. When his advisor comes in the frame and tells him he has received a call from the Shinzen group, and when the man heads back to his office, he receives a call and has a conversation with the person on the other end. And as they continue talking, they mention the group of kids who we might assume are the perpetrators who dealt wrong to our main character, and it's revealed that these people are their parents. They further engage in their talk, expressing how sorry they feel for their children to have been kept away from the world due to the incident they caused, and are delighted to know it's time for them to come back to Korea. Scene shifts and we see a figure lurking in the shadows, and from the stare our boy gives, we see he's stalking what the president was earlier saying on his political matters. The scene shifts to an international airport, where we see new characters arriving, guarded by 2 bodyguards. The names of these characters are Eugene, Junhyuk, and Suha, and from the last few episodes, we know that these are the names of the bullies of our main character. And as they step out, they are called out by the rest of their group, which consists of Hyun, Dehun, and Chang-soo. And we are informed their last 2 members are not present but have decided to sneak off to Japan for the time being. And after the group is done reminiscing and chatting with each other, some of them decide to take their leave, and we see that the 2 left behind have a chat of their own as one of them asks the other if they've checked out a certain location, asking whether they've located where our main character lives. Their scheme is to get back at our main character for causing them trouble. He's the one that got them into lockdown in the first place. The scene shifts once more, and at this point, I'll speak with our main character's name, which is Sejong. And over the phone, his aunt is asking him if he's not going to go back to school, which he of course disapproves of. But his aunt, on the other end, argues that he can't stay in his current position forever. They continue their heartfelt conversation, and Sejong's auntie suggests he move in with her, but he prefers to remain in Korea as he's still experiencing trauma. After their coverage finishes, he drops his phone, and we see him in a new light with his sword in hand. We then see Chang-soo and Jun-hyuk in a vehicle discussing the location of our main character. But then they seem to struggle, as they can't even get a single picture to guarantee where his location is. Even commenting on the fact that Sejong never even steps out of his place. He never goes to school, and nobody has yet to even see him walk out of his building. As one of them brings up a suggestion to hire one of their acquaintances to barge into his house and beat him to a pulp, and this immediately gets the other delinquent laughing nonstop. And whilst they're chatting, Jun-hyuk reveals that Soo-yoon, one of the unidentified yet members, didn't actually go to Japan just to relax. But the truth is, he got invited by the yakuza, which might pose a threat to our main character, Sejong. We then see on Betagram that the group posted a picture of themselves all reunited again as a gang, and our main character simply stares at this with a cold expression in his eye, reading over a text one of them posted expressing their joy to be reunited and how long they have been waiting for their day of freedom. And as our main character puts down his phone, he too wishes to be reunited with them once more, as he looks at the photo with a cold expression in his eyes. Back at the airport, we're introduced to two new characters, Soo-yoon and Hae-hyun, who are being escorted by two other individuals. And we learn that the reason they were able to escape from their lockdown ahead of time was because Hae-hyun's dad being elected president got the gears turning faster for them to be able to get out of lockdown. And the four of them quickly get into their vehicles. As they're seated in the car, they start chatting, getting straight to their points. The two unnamed characters reveal themselves to be somewhat associated with the yakuza gang, and the Fanes plan to use them in order to erase our main character from the face of the earth, and they've already sent out men to do this. This, in turn, sparks the whole group to start chuckling and laughing, when, abruptly, Soo-yoon receives a notification on his phone. When he checks the message, an angry expression on his face follows when he reads the text from Jun-hyuk, stating he got bored waiting for them to initialize their hunt, so he went ahead and got started already. We see this as the scene shifts to two roughed-up men in a car bickering amongst themselves. And the other man is pissed at having to take care of such a low-life job for some teenagers. And he vents out all his frustration on his teammate, who's driving the car. And he asserts that he can't wait to finish his job and go back to his place. And when they arrive at their destination and take a stop, he instructs his partner to stay in the car while he goes deal with their target. And he continues his yelling on the street as if he's having a seizure, and out of frustration, he decides he's going to even rough up our boy a little bit before bringing him into the car. As he enters the building, he goes up a flock of stairs and eventually arrives at the door of our main character's roof. He opens the door and sees that the land is still clear, as if nobody's even living on it, questioning why there aren't any windows added to the house. He walks up to the door and opens it, but he can't seem to see much as it's too dark inside and thinks that nobody lives in the building. Personally, if I saw that I'm doing a 360 turn and heading back home, there's no amount of money to face that for. His partner soon checks his watch, wondering why his partner is taking such a long time to deal with a scrawny high schooler. And as he gets impatient, he decides to go on the rooftop to check out why his partner is taking so long. And when he finally arrives and heads toward the door that will lead to his demise, he notices the door left open, and he jokingly remarks on whether his partner is trying to get them recognized. And as he tries to get a sneak peek at what's inside the house, out of nowhere, a large hand grabs onto his face with a large impact, dragging him inside the house, and just like that, the man disappears. And after a little while, two policemen seem to be checking the car of the sent yakuza men, wondering why there's just a random car lying on the street, and they begin studying the car, checking the license plates, when one of the officers states that the building in front of them has actually been under surveillance by the top authority, which explains why the main character has been so heavily guarded, and we see that the disappearance of the two men is not left unnoticed along with their mission. Chang-soo gets a notification on his phone asking about how the mission went. But he instead takes a deep sigh, as he hasn't received feedback on how the mission went. And Jun-hyuk immediately starts bickering at him for this and screams at the top of his lungs to make those goons finish up their job. And Chang-soo decides to call up one of his uncles, who is the head of the Merit Credit Agency, President Choi Jong-kin. And he immediately jumped to the conclusion, thinking that his boy had already dealt with their target. But then his smile goes upside down to a frown as Chang-soo, on the other hand, tells him that he hasn't gotten a note from them as to whether they finished their mission or not. And Chang-soo further states that they might be amateurs, even going so far as to call them kids. But his uncle only gets pissed off more from this and tells Chang he'll check and call to see what's going on and to tell him that he should just wait in the meantime. But Chang-soo just follows up by saying he's in a hurry, and he starts to wonder if he should have just called his other uncle. And this immediately hurt the man's pride, as he only agreed to do this favor for his nephew because he's the son of his older brother. When Chang-soo dropped the phone, the man immediately screamed at the top of his lungs, wondering where those goons were. We then shift scenes to see two phones suddenly vibrating on the ground, and we see that the two previous goons who plan to attack our main character are currently knocked out on the floor cold, and we see our main character looming over their bodies and glares at their corpses. We shift again to the Incheon International Airport, and we see our two previous predators, Soo-yoon and Hae-hyun. And we see that both of them have two separate visitors, one having to escort the president's daughter, Hae-hyun, and one being an unknown character who was associated with Soo-yoon. And with no time to spare, the woman quickly takes Whitey's hand, telling her that her father's been worried about her and was instructed to immediately take her to him, leaving Soo-yoon all by himself. And the panel shifts to a random man on the rooftop who just received a call from Chang-soo's uncle, President Choi Jong-kin, screaming at the top of his lungs as to why the job the unidentified man was given hasn't been fulfilled. And so, as a result, he tells him to quickly finish up his job, as his pride is on the line. And the unidentified man just deep sighs over this, wondering why two of his men still haven't gotten back to him, not knowing they have been knocked out cold by our boy. And we learn that this man is Dong-suk, second team leader of the Merit Credit Agency, which is secretly also a part of a gang. And with no time to waste, he immediately starts calling his employees to inform him about the holdup with the other two. But they all respond, saying that they're clueless about their whereabouts, leaving the man in a daze as he quickly decides to go check out for himself what is going on. After some time, he arrives at the specific location where the other two gangsters were previously. And as he approached the building, he saw that there was a towed sign on the building stating that a car had been towed recently. As he continued observing the sign for more information, he saw information on the license plate numbers, and he realized that this was the same car that belonged to their organization. And as he looks at the tow sign even closer, he gains information that the goon's car was towed at 10:21 that morning, which leads to the conclusion that it has been hours since they've been at the building, and this leaves the man wondering what the heck they have been doing this whole time. We see President Porkchop running down the hallway as he soon enters the room, screaming at the top of his lungs and calling for Dong-suk. And one of the employees is surprised at the president's arrival, wondering why he's here, as the president immediately orders him to come for questioning. He then proceeds to ask where Dong-suk is, along with the rest of the employees. The man answers that Dong-suk ordered all of his men to come to his location, at our main character's location. President Porkchop is surprised to know this, and he immediately calls up Dong-suk to know why he called up so many of their men to deal with one target, and why he wasn't answering his phone. Dong-suk, on the other end, quickly pauses him, telling him that they may have a problem, stating that the two boys he sent earlier have gone missing, and he feels a suspicious feeling about their target's location. So he decided to call everyone in their gang in order to check out the place. President Porkchop immediately gives them permission to continue as the rest of the men arrive, and they immediately begin heading into the building, going through the flock of stairs. and Dong-suk immediately orders his men to enter the premises of our main character. And after a little while, we start hearing screams and yells in the background. And as Dong-suk goes up a couple of more stairs, he already accentuates that the fight is already over and their target is eliminated, thinking he might have even gone overboard, when suddenly one of his men shoots out from the door, landing on the wall, bloodied up. And this immediately sends Suk into a spiral of shock as our main character steps out and we witness the horrific sight of a 10-foot-tall gigantic titan coming out, and Dong-suk immediately stumbles upon the floor at the sight of such a monstrosity, even asking who our main character is when the better question is, what is our main character? But before he could ask any further questions, our main character kindly readjusted his face, but he may have expressed too much of his kindness in his case. After some time, some policemen arrived at the building and asked some of the residents why they were called immediately. They replied, saying that they'd heard some screams and yelling and saw some gangsters who had entered the building. The policemen decide to go check out what's with the screaming and noise that have been happening at the place, and when they start heading up to the stairs, one of them notices a lock on the ground and sees it's been lockpicked, which instantly raises caution. And with caution, the men reach nearer to the top. Then they begin banging on the door, stating that they're the police. Our main character steps out, towering over the two officers. The officers witnessing the giant in front of them are, of course, shocked by his figure. And when one of them looks behind to see what's behind our main character, they instantly take out their taser, telling our main character to halt. And his partner, on the other hand, not understanding the sudden act of his partner, is in shock as to why he's already taking out his taser when his partner instructs him to check what's behind our main character, and whatever he saw also causes him to also pull off the same reflex. At the building, there seem to be ambulances and police cars carrying a bunch of dead corpses. And President Porkchop is stunned at the sight, wondering what is going on as he sees his men on stretches, bleeding to a pulp, and then back to the two policemen. One of the policemen bickers at our main character, which might be because he thinks that our main character is a citizen of 18 years old or older due to his tall figure. But our main character clearly clarifies that he's just going to turn 18 this year. So he doesn't have a civilian registration number yet, which leaves this officer shocked. With the officer insisting further, his disapproval of the fact leads our boy to explain that his name is Seyoung. He used to attend a middle school, but then he took a break during his second year. But then he holds off when he has to state the reason. And the other officer who's on the phone with an unknown character is told to immediately withdraw from the place, even though many dead corpses were found on the rooftop, which left immense blood spilled on the crime scene. The officer continues to argue that even though the kid is supposedly younger than 18 years old, he's about 2 meters tall. But the person on the other line just tells him, it doesn't matter whether he's 2 meters or not, and the fact that he roughed up the gang members doesn't also matter. He should still withdraw unless he wants to deal with the publicity and news reporters. And angrily with that, the police officer takes off with his leave, informing his partner to also withdraw from the scene. And after some time, Seyoung talks to his aunt over the phone. He tells his aunt that he wishes to come to the U.S., but follows up with a statement to say that he still has business to take care of, and that he wants to get some fresh air before he comes to visit her. Clearly hiding his true intentions and actions for his unsolved business, he then hangs up, telling her that he'll probably call her more frequently. And with that, our boy ventures into the start of his savage arc. Then we go back to our two previous delinquents, Chang-soo and Jun-hyuk. But for the sake of pronunciation, I'll just call him Snow White for the time being. Snow White immediately starts yelling at Chang-soo over the phone as to why he still hasn't gotten a report back on the men that were sent to deal with our main character, even stating his disappointment as to why there's still no feedback. And Chang-soo tries to calmly explain the situation, but Snow White clearly is not taking any of that, as he continues to yell and swear at Chang-soo, remembering how he dared to provoke Sae-hyun to target our main character first unplanned, and now feels ashamed because he was acting all high and mighty, thinking that he was going to beat him to the punch. And before he hangs up, he again throws an insult at Chang-soo, which leads Chang-soo to throw his phone on the bed when he receives a call from Soo-ha. And on the other line, Soo-ha tells him that Soo-yoon wants to see him and is told to bring a certain item, and we see that the package Changsu was supposed to deliver was a folder with pictures of our Se-young's location. But unfortunately for them, it's unclear whether that's where he really lives, as there's no evident sight of Se-young in the pictures. This leaves Se-hyun feeling a bit paranoid, and in his head, Changsu cowers that the two higher-up friends act as if they're entitled to everything. Se-hyun gives the instructions for the documents and pictures to be sent to the operators in Korea, who are the gang members meant to deal with our boy, and specifically instructs them not to meet up with them personally, as he doesn't want to leave any traces, even if they're dealing with pros, as he doesn't want to relive the hell 2 years he had to endure on lockdown. Although I would just suggest that he doesn't indulge in criminal activities again, but it seems like that suggestion is just going over his head. And as he's about to leave, he approaches Changsu and asks him what Snow White meant when he said that he was going to play with their toy first. But Changsu, being a little cat, bites on his teeth and states that he doesn't know what Snow White meant at the time, which leaves Se-hyun to stare at him suspiciously. When Suho receives a notification on his phone saying that the 2 men hired to go after our main character have already arrived at the location and they'll bring him in 1 hour, the others are thrilled as they begin to laugh to know that the mission has been dealt with so quickly and with ease, and all they have to do now is just wait, and we transition to see that the 2 men look as threatening as their profession does. And as the 2 men approach the rooftop, they open up the door and go over the details of the target, a bit shaken that it's a mere 18-year-old kid. But as they witness the bloodshed all over the ground left behind by the previous men that were sent, they sense they should not take their mission lightly. And as they are about to enter, the taller partner suddenly grabs his companion's shoulder, sensing the aura of a beast within the house. But his companion immediately disregards his senses, stating that maybe our main character might be keeping some sort of wild animal in there. And as they are about to take care of their duties, out of nowhere, a punch is launched through the door, which flies so far that it connects with the bald man's face, leaving his whole body closed against the fence, splattering his blood all over the door. This leaves the other man temporarily paralyzed in shock. He snaps out of it and immediately tries to go for a punch at Se-young. Our boy eats that punch right up, stares down at his opponent, then raises his fist, then, like a gentleman, gently places his fist on the guy's face, reassembling his face, leaving blood splattered everywhere, along with subsequently shrinking the man's face by accident. And with the little strength he has, he looks at our main character and is surprised to see that such a monster exists. Then Se-young bends over like a crazed animal at his fallen opponent, emitting a beastly aura. We transition back to Se-hyun, back at his base, having a discussion with one of the leaders of the yakuza, who sent out the 2 pummeled men to take care of Se-young. Soo-yoon is concerned as to why the man didn't send more men to the mission. The man clears down his doubts, as the people he sent were pros among pros. So there should be no worry for them at all. When coincidentally, he gets a phone call from his 2 men, but then it seems over the line a different voice is heard, which leaves him curious to know what's going on, when he suddenly hears the screams of Kenta, who was the taller man of the 2. And was shocked to hear Kenta screaming, as he's known to be a wild beast among the organization. We see that on the other end. Our main character is stepping on Kenta with his bare foot, asking where the goons are located. As the yakuza man drops the phone, our main character takes his next step of action, telling one of the men who intruded on his home to start driving to the location where the others are. When our boy takes a step behind the car, like a menace, he rips off the hood of the car with his bare hand and tosses it away, drops Kenta in the backseat, and instructs the other partner to start driving. And the yakuza boss, having heard feints of the situation, immediately instructs the others to start packing and leave as they have failed the mission, and Se-hyun is pissed that the men failed to take care of one little kid. But the yakuza man, not wanting to explain any further, tells them to start moving for their safety. But Se-hyun, being the arrogant kid he is, starts bickering as to why they couldn't deal with a high school kid when they're 2 professional yakuza men. Midway through his yelling, a scream is suddenly heard from outside, and we are notified that our main character has arrived with his sword on his back. As our Se-young steps out of the car, people gather around to see his unbelievably bulky figure and sword attached to his back, thinking that maybe they're shooting a new movie. But all of a sudden, the crowd freaks out once they notice a man bleeding profusely in the booth of the car, and we see that their screams are heard by the others at the top of the building. The yakuza man immediately grasps the situation and takes charge, telling the others to immediately start running, and Suhyung, using his brain, comes up with a plan for them to split up. And Chang-soo tries to take the opportunity to go with Suhyung, but Suhyung makes up an excuse and instead is asked out by Hyung out of panic, so he decides to forget the meaning of bros before hoes and chooses to escape with Hyung. Then he instructs Suha to take the stairs in the back and instructs Chang-soo to take the other stairs, and instructs the yakuza man to take the upper stairs as he leaves off with Hyung, and leaves Chang-soo feeling betrayed. And we see our main character slowly heading up the stairs, and Chang-soo starts running, remarking on the fact that Suhyung did not want to leave with him, when he crosses paths with our main character. And the others head down a certain direction and near a door gap when suddenly a hand appears out of the dark. But then we see that it is a policeman, which puts everyone to rest. Although it doesn't make sense as to why the yakuza man is at rest. On the other hand, Chung wakes up from being knocked out by something. And the man who knocked him out, whom he can't seem to recognize, tells him to wake up, and he is immediately petrified to see the large figure of the man in front of him. And when he looks at his back, he sees one of Se-young's victims who tried to kill him with a new face makeover that Se-young gave him, and as Se-young tries to ask him more questions per his orders, Chang-suk, afraid to follow further orders, questions who the man in front of him is, as he can't seem to recognize our main character. When outside, we see a team of SWAT members and policemen who have come due to the uproar our main character has caused, and one of the policemen below the building questions our boy about his motive for his acts. When calm, our main character starts chatting with Chang-soo, and Chang-soo is surprised to know that the individual knows his name, wondering who it is. And almost as if he had read his mind, Se-young introduces himself to Chang-soo. And flashbacks start coming back to Chang-soo, when he was bullying our main character, and with a terrified expression on his face, he repeats again what the man in front of him said, questioning how that is possible as the monster in front of him looks nothing like the little shrimp he used to bully. And the officers down below immediately take note of the unidentified attacker's name, Se-young. And Chang-soo is still surprised to know that the little tarp that was once 5 feet tall is now 10 feet tall. Our main character then turns to the public and tells them of his story. 3 years ago, in front of Gwangwa Moon, 2 people named Tak Chang-sun and Go Yunjin sacrificed their lives enveloped in a flame, and these people were his parents. And everybody who heard the announcement simultaneously remembered the incident that happened a few years ago with a quavering expression on all their faces as they recalled the incident. And our main character puts down his sword on Chang-soo's neck, and Chang-soo immediately breaks his facade and enables his coward mode, calling for his mommy and daddy. But our boy was only annoyed at this, and he continued to state that his parents paid for their lives under the fire in order to garner attention to the incident. Otherwise, his son's bullying would have been overlooked. And from today onwards, he will make every one of the people who made his parents suffer pay for what his parents had to suffer, and he promises them that. We see that this announcement was broadcasted all over the country as people start gossiping amongst themselves about the incident that occurred, and piece together that the man being broadcasted is the son of the couple that were engulfed in the flame, and are shocked to realize that that kid from the incident must now be 18 years old as the man currently broadcasted. Down below the building, the officer still continues to investigate the matter further, wondering who the man's true identity is as we also learn more about where Chang's arrogance comes from and how much power his family and he hold. He is the son of the largest domestic private security service, President Kim Sang-pil. And on the cover, they appear to be just a normal company. But the true essence of the company is that they're an organized crime organization that is spread over the entire country. And the officer was surprised to know that our main character is bold enough to take hostage the son of such an important man. And to stall more time, he asks more questions as to why our main character has taken the boys hostage and what his demands are for such a stunt. Having had enough, he responds that there will be no negotiations, and the officer replies back to know what his demands are, at least. But our main character, with a clear voice, tells them there is no demand. All he has is an announcement, and as the public pays attention to what he's about to say, our main character starts listing the names of Lee Soo-yoon, Jang Soo-jung, Kim Jun-hyuk, and Kim Yoo-jin. Then, Lee Soo-ha, Jang De-hun, Nam Hyun, and finally Chang-soo right next to him. He declares that all of them will die at his hands, and to add fuel to the fire, he even states that all their parents will also die at his hands, including their sisters and brothers. And to add more icing to the cake, he even dares to say that whether they call the police or the military, it doesn't matter. He finna run all they pockets. This man literally just called out the military and said they weren't going to be shit to him. And looking at this panel, I can see it doesn't seem far-fetched. And if they can't find him, he'll just come for them and kill them with his bare hands, Chang-soo, being a coward to the very end. It threatens our main character with knowing what will happen to him if he actually tries to kill him, and his parents' power will hang him dry and kill him. And as he sees his hands shaking, he thinks it's out of fear, but when he looks at his face, it's actually him shaking off anger. And with one last announcement, he tells the world to watch carefully, as this is his declaration of war. As he swings up his sword and cuts Chang's head off, his head falls silently to the ground, leaving everybody watching the broadcast in shock. And we see that Chang's father, who was also watching the broadcast, was devastated at the sight of his son's head getting chopped off. And he screams at the top of his lungs in tears to swear revenge at our main character for touching his son, even though I'm pretty sure he did more than just touch his son. Then we transition to Hae-young's father, who is the elected, soon-to-be 21st president, who had also watched the broadcast, calling up one of the higher-up acquaintances in the military to immediately order a shoot to kill the main character. And the policemen who are located at the building immediately received orders to also shoot and kill our main character, as they've already laid down some men and snipers to shoot down our boy. And with no time to spare, one of the snipers shoots their bullet at our main character's face. After the bullet is fired, they think victory is already theirs for the taking, but to their shock, they see that the main character actually reflected the bullet, and it was reported as a failure. But with no resolve to back out, they're instructed to shoot once more, and all of them start shooting a barrage of shots towards Se-young, when suddenly our main character disappears from the scene out of nowhere. And he jumps and grinds down from the building like King Kong. And as he lands, he wastes no time getting down to laying hands, stating that all of them will die by his hands today. He then throws his sword in the direction of the policemen, which immediately sparks the battle between him and the policemen. And with his sword shoved inside one of the cars, he throws the car on top of another car in front of the men, which, on impact, causes an explosion. And he walks out of the flames, engulfing his clothes as if he's hell's spawn, here to send every offender back to hell. As the police chief officer takes the time to admire our main character in the midst of the battle, he contemplates whether the sight he just witnessed is humanly possible and if our main character is even human. When he gets a backbone and gives the order for the men to continue shooting, but before they could shoot, Se-young jumps way above and disappears out of the police's sight, and as they try to spot him, he comes up from behind and lands on two soldiers. And as soon as they shake off their surprise and Se-young tries to get back up, they take the opportunity to once again shoot, and the chief officer orders the sniper to shoot. And the sniper targets our main character, and, after a second, shoots. As the shot comes to approach Se-young, for a millisecond he diverts his eyes to the shot, and with quick reflexes, he blocks the sniper shot with his sword. And once again finding an opportunity, the officer orders the men to shoot to kill once more, and the men prep to shoot once more, all pointing their guns towards Se-young. But Se-young unprovoked plans for another move, and the soldiers already started shooting their barrage of fire. And it seems all of them ain't got aimbots because somehow all their shots are missing, as Se-young goes in charging towards the bullets, whips out his sword, and cuts right through most of the soldiers and their defense in one slash, sending some of the soldiers flying back. Then the news reporters finally decide to gain some common sense and start running away from the chaos. And it is shown to us that Se-young is still clearing out the army of police and SWAT men while raging mad. Transitioning back to Soo-yoon, he's busy also watching the broadcast and is shook as to what Se-young has become, seeing him cause rampage in the city. And in the back, Hae-hyun has covered herself up in blankets and is shivering from fear as well. And as seconds pass, both of them are terrified and in horror as to what Se-young will do to them relating to the announcement he made to kill them. Then, back at the fight arena, we no longer see our main character, but instead see what remains of the battlefield and men being carried on stretchers, as many of them were injured in the fight. And we frame the chief police officer cornering someone against a wall, asking the man what he and Se-young talked about before Se-young's departure, and a short flashback shows us that when Se-young had wiped the floor with everyone excluding the man, he had saved him up to ask where the teen group could be found, and we learn that the man gave up their location, which was at Shinjin University Hospital, and he immediately received a hard punch to the side of his face from the office for retardedly giving up the location of the kids, and as he collapses, the officer makes an announcement to reveal Se-young has headed to Shinjin University Hospital and for everyone to head there. And back at the two paralyzed lovebirds, we see outside that, standing on top of a high building, our main character has found the two's location. Hae-hyun and Se-hyun are listening to the broadcasted news where they reveal Se-young has run away from the scene, and whereabouts of his location are unknown, and this only grows the living fear in the two to grow, when suddenly a woman enters their hospital room, and Se-hyun questions who the woman is, to which she answers she's from the Secret Service, and is there to escort them to safety, as the rest of the men come in and carry a shivering Hae-young. And, moments later, the officer's announcement reaches the service agency men, and they all hold. Out of nowhere, our boy jumps in the building through the building's window, and as he's in motion he throws daggers at Se-hyun, and everyone else is caught off guard by the sudden entrance. As Se-young crashes straight into the wall as well, the men take their stances to prepare for battle. And as Se-young reveals himself, the men are at a loss for words as they observe Se-young's figure towering over them. When he quickly redirects his attention to wars, Se-hyun is hiding behind the guards, and his anger is brought to life. He remembers his parents' sacrifice for him against facing Se-hyun's family power, and he calls out to Se-hyun, but he is dragged away by the woman, and the others try to hold him off. But in less than a minute, Se-young knocks out one of the guys, and as the other one tries to use their gun, he throws a punch that sends the man rocketing through the window and towards the outside. And the other men, shaking off their fear, take the chance to whip out their guns in fashion, and as the others are in the elevator punching on the buttons, one of the guards approaches them, limping while his blood is covered all over his face, requesting for them to save him as he reaches out his hand, but suddenly a sword comes out of nowhere and hangs the man bloodied against the wall, and the others are traumatized to witness the sight, questioning if our main character is even human even though he's clearly not. As they slowly start heading down the elevator, Se-hyun wonders if they're not supposed to be taking the helicopter instead. They suddenly feel pressure hitting the elevator, causing them to shake, and they guess correctly who it could be, but wonder how it is possible, as we see Se-young on top of the elevator, stone cold, shoving his sword through the elevator. And as the elevator reaches the count of 4, he aggressively starts shoving the sword through the elevator, causing everybody to panic, and as the countdown reawakens to 1, Se-hyun and the woman take the chance to flee, while for some reason the bodyguard freezes temporarily but is soon stabbed on the shoulder by the sword. As blood comes out, Hae-hyun is petrified at the sight and jumps off the guy, pushing him to meet his demise as the elevator collapses on him, and the impact causes them to be pushed back a bit. Then the woman takes Hae-hyun on her shoulder, and Soo-yoon only stands and stares at an incoming Se-young, asking them where they're going in a menacing tone. Out of nowhere, a vehicle comes in, speeding towards Se-young, and although he's not fazed by it and blocks the attack with his sword, it still sends him back a few meters, and we see an associate of Soo-yoon, Mr. Yang, walk out and tell them to quickly enter. As Se-young approaches, he will hold him off for as long as he can for them to make their getaway. And as the car departs, Se-young tries to freely chase them in the car, but Teacher Yang doesn't tolerate the disrespect and pulls out his gun and shoots a couple of shots at Se-young, which, to no surprise, they all miss, and Se-young, seeing that mercy is not an option, looks back at the guy while he tries to say some cliché stuff about, if you want to go after them, you must go through me first. but Seung doesn't entertain it as he comes in flying with a punch before Mr. Yang could even finish and pummels him to the ground, leaving with another body count added to his score. Back at the road, the others are still nervous as to whether Seung will show up or not. As the woman checks for safe areas for them to escape, and up above the sky, we see a beast is following them.